Welcome to Lesson 12. Today's lesson is all about rendering. This is one of the most artistic aspects of working in 3D, a stage where creativity takes the lead over technical precision. Here, we don't rely on fixed numbers or ready-made settings. Instead of following strict presets, we approach each frame individually. The right balance of color, light, and shadow is explored in real time, as we search for the unique combination that best fits the scene. This is where your personal style emerges, and visual storytelling truly comes to life. Let's open the pavilion scene and start working on the interior view. First, let's position the camera properly to frame the scene in a clean and balanced way. Next, arrange the trees so they're visible in the shot, but don't overwhelm it. Remove any extra trees that don't add value. We don't want to overload the scene unnecessarily. Also, reduce the grass density to 0 for now. We'll add more later when it becomes necessary. If you've seen this project before, you might know that there's a specific sculpture placed in this view. You can find many versions of this sculpture online for free. Just search for Miss van der Rohe Sculpture 3D model on Google. Download the model you prefer and merge it into the scene. Modeling human figures, facial features, and other complex organic forms is a more advanced topic. We'll cover that in a separate modeling course dedicated to deep character work. Such models are usually created using a shift polygon drag technique, starting from a front view reference image and then refined from the side profile. But we'll come back to that another time. For now, as architectural visualizers, what matters most is the ability to quickly find existing assets, adapt them to the scene, and use them efficiently. Time is a crucial factor in this field, and knowing how to work fast with high-quality resources can make a huge difference. Let's assign a marble material to the sculpture and apply a UVW map modifier to it. However, to keep things flexible and allow separate adjustments later on, it's better to make a copy of the marble material first. Simply drag and drop the original material into an empty slot in the material editor. Rename it so we don't confuse it with the original one, and then apply this new version to the sculpture. This way, we can freely tweak the sculpture's material without affecting any other objects that use the same marble shader. Let's go ahead and run our first test render to see what we're working with. It might be a good idea to scale the sculpture up slightly. It feels a bit small in the frame. I'll also add some metalness and a bit of glossiness in the chrome metal settings. A metalness value of 0.5 gives a good result. The color looks more natural and subdued, and the reflection is no longer overly mirror-like. I also want to try adding a subtle green tint to the windows. That slight coloration gives the image a beautiful, old-school vibe. As for the water, let's try making it a bit more transparent. We'll increase the fog depth to around 3 centimeters. That should give us a clearer feel without losing depth. Now select the camera and let's go through its settings together. In this section, we'll look at the aperture controls of the V-Ray physical camera: ISO, f-number, and shutter speed. The three main parameters that determine exposure, much like in real-world photography. ISO controls the virtual sensor's sensitivity. Higher ISO brightens the image while lower darkens it. In real photography, high ISO introduces noise, but in V-Ray, that doesn't happen. The render quality stays clean. Any noise comes from low-quality lighting or GI settings, not ISO itself. So, you're free to adjust it for exposure without degrading quality. F-number changes the aperture size. Lower values like 1.8 or 1.4 let in more light and create a shallow depth of field, meaning more background blur. Higher values like 8 darken the image and bring more of the scene into focus. It's a key tool for controlling the artistic focus in your shot. To create a noticeable depth of field effect, we'll set the f-number to 1.4. This wide aperture helps create a more photographic, cinematic feel by separating the subject from its surroundings through controlled focus. Of course, opening the aperture this much also increases the exposure, making the image brighter. To correct this, we can lower the ISO from the default value of 100 down to 8 or 9. This brings the brightness back down without affecting image quality. Shutter speed defines how long light hits the virtual sensor. Slower shutter speeds make the image brighter and create motion blur. Faster shutter speeds freeze motion but make the image darker. In this case, we don't necessarily need to adjust it. Together, these settings let you mimic real camera behavior inside 3D, but with more freedom because ISO doesn't harm your image, and you can control depth and blur exactly how you want. After entering the settings, scroll down below the DOF and motion blur section and enable depth of field. As you can see, this pushes the pole near the camera out of focus. At the same time, the sculpture also becomes slightly blurred. Now let's define the area that should remain sharp. This is done by moving the camera's target. Place the target where you want the center of the focus range to be. Then select the camera and you'll see 3 depth of field guides appear. From right to left, the first line indicates where the focus zone begins. The middle one marks the center of the focus zone, and the largest one shows where the focus zone ends. Anything beyond this range will appear blurred, and the farther an object is from this focus area, the stronger the blur effect will be. Let's take a look at the result. The sculpture is now back in focus while the pole remains blurred. If you scroll further down under the color and exposure section, you can enable vignetting. It is a visual effect where the corners of an image appear darker than the center, drawing focus toward the middle. I think we don't really need it in this shot, since the corners are already quite dark. I always feel like experimenting with the glass tint, trying out different variations. Even a very dark tint might actually look good. As for the sculpture, let's test different glossiness levels to see which works best. Right now, it feels too blended with the background. Change the color of the sculpture so it stands out more clearly. We can reduce the saturation a bit and shift the tone slightly toward red. This already looks noticeably better. We can also slightly increase the second layer of reflectivity by adjusting the coat amount. Now, let's learn how to balance bright and dark areas in the render. Go to the main window and press F10 to open the render setup. Switch to the V-Ray tab, scroll down to the color mapping section, and choose Exponential as the type. Next to it, you'll see two controls, Dark Multiplier and Bright Multiplier. As you increase the dark multiplier value, the darker and shadowed areas in the render become brighter. Light is able to penetrate these areas more easily. The bright multiplier, on the other hand, controls the intensity of the brightest parts of the render. For demonstration purposes, you can assign especially high values to these controls to clearly see how this panel affects the image. Updated parameter values won't take effect automatically. You still need to refresh the render to see the changes, even when using interactive rendering. As you can see, the brightest spots in the sky have turned dark due to lowering the bright multiplier to 0.1. At the same time, raising the dark multiplier to 10 not only brightened the dark areas, but also affected even the mid-tone lighting, which may be too much. Let's adjust these settings to more reasonable values. Set the dark multiplier to 2 or 2.5. This will bring the scene to life and add more light to the environment. As for the bright multiplier, let's leave it at 1.0. This tool becomes especially useful when rendering interiors. Let's say you've set up a dome light and increased its intensity to brighten the scene. What often happens is that the area near the window becomes overly bright, almost blown out, while the rest of the room, especially the areas farther from the window, remain too dark and underexposed. Instead of continuing to raise the light's intensity, which can lead to unnatural results, you can achieve a much better balance by adjusting the dark multiplier and bright multiplier settings. This helps light spread more evenly throughout the space and creates a more natural-looking result. Now let's experiment with the sunlight a bit. We'll try casting the sun's rays from different directions and observe how the shadows change. First, let's try lighting from the opposite side. I find the diagonal shadow stretching from left to right much more visually interesting. I'll adjust the position slightly up and down to see which looks best. Let's reduce the metal's reflectivity a bit. That looks great. I especially like how the lighting highlights the sculpture and pool area. However, I don't like how the sunlight hits the metal pole near the camera. I picture that spot as darker with a smoother, more subtle lighting. So instead of moving the sun back and forth too much, let's temporarily add a wall just for this shot. We can copy any existing wall and apply a white material to it. This wall will block sunlight coming from the left side of the frame. Try adjusting its size slightly. It's better, but maybe it's best to block the light completely and make that area darker and more mysterious. So extend the wall all the way to the edge. Yes, this definitely looks better. I'd like to adjust the sun while still looking through the camera. Let's first select the sun so we have access to its parameters. Then press C on the keyboard to switch to the camera view. Snap the render frame window to the right side of the screen so the Move button becomes visible. Right-click on the Move button to open the input panel for movement values. Since we're working in centimeters, dragging the sun changes its position too slowly, so instead, let's manually enter a number to lift the sun slightly. There we go, this looks much better. Alright, let's try running a high-quality render now. First, press F10 to open the Render Setup window. In the Common tab, we'll do a few basic things. Set the output directory, which is where the rendered image will be saved. Choose a format, like PNG or JPEG. For now, let's turn off the alpha channel. We don't need transparency at this point. Set the resolution to Full HD, which means 1920 by 1080. Now switch over to the V-Ray tab and look for the image sampler settings. Choose Bucket as the sampler type. Set the minimum subdivisions to 1 and the maximum to 24. The higher the subdivisions, the cleaner and less noisy your render will be. But keep in mind, this also increases render time. If you notice the render is taking too long, try lowering the max subdivisions. Maybe go with 16 or 12 or even 8 and see how your system handles it. For the noise threshold, set it to 0.005. If you're working on a weaker system, you can increase that to 0.01 for faster results, though you might get a bit more noise. Set the filter type to Sharp Quadratic. And under color mapping, select Exponential as the type. We have already set the dark and bright multipliers, so leave them as they are. Next, let's move to the GI tab. For the primary engine, choose Brute Force, and for the secondary, Light Cache. In the Light Cache settings, you'll see a preset dropdown. Set that to Animation. It gives you more subdivisions, which helps render dark areas more accurately and with better quality. And that's it. Now let's hit the render button and see what result we get. Hover your mouse over the left edge of the V-Ray frame buffer. Then, using the click and drag method, pull out the panel from the side. This panel displays additional render tools and options, such as history. Click the top left button labeled Save to History. This will store the current render in the V-Ray frame buffer's default history folder and add it to the history panel so you can easily reload any previous or recent renders directly into the frame buffer window. For comparison, I'll make a second render where I'll add more tint to the windows. So let's darken the fog color a little bit. Don't forget that we've also specified a save directory where our renders are being stored. This is separate from the history directory. It saves the renders independently. Click Yes if you want to overwrite the last saved render, or change the file name to save it as a new one. As soon as the render is finished, add it to the history. Click the button next to it labeled AB and assign statuses to the renders in the list. Set one as A and the other as B. This will place a divider line in the middle of the render window, which you can drag left or right to compare the two renders precisely. Imagine you want to make a change to your render, but you don't want to waste time re-rendering parts that haven't changed. For example, let's adjust the statue's texture to make it greener. After making this change, go to the right panel and choose Region Render. Then select the area around the statue by drawing a box around it and hit the render. This way, only that specific part will re-render, saving you time. As soon as the render finishes, turn off the region selection and add the render to the history list. Let's compare the green statue to the previous version using the AB tool. As you're watching this rendering process, keep in mind that it's sped up for demonstration purposes. In reality, it actually took about an hour and a half to complete. So let's explore a much faster rendering method. Press F10 to open the render setup, then go to the V-Ray tab. Instead of bucket, select progressive as the image sampler. You can increase the subdivisions and lower the noise threshold to improve quality. With this method, we won't wait for the render to finish completely. We'll stop it as soon as the detail level looks good enough and save it immediately. You'll better understand what I mean as we proceed. Switch to the Render Elements tab. Click Add, find and select V-Ray Denoiser. You'll now see the V-Ray Denoiser element added to the list. Click on it, then scroll down to reveal its settings. In the denoiser engine dropdown, choose NVIDIA AI Denoiser, and just below that, enable the NVIDIA AI Upscale option. All right, let's try rendering now. AI will almost instantly begin removing noise and modifying the render live. At first, the effect is very noticeable, but as the render progresses and more detailed data is sent to the denoiser, the image becomes increasingly refined. This method can be 5 or even 10 times faster depending on the complexity of the scene. We'll stop the render once we're reasonably satisfied with the result and save it to history. Now let's compare the AI denoised render with the classic version. You'll notice that the denoised version looks a bit more blurred, especially with fewer details on the floor. If we had let the render run longer, the detail would have gradually improved. So the choice is yours depending on your goal. If it's a final render for production, I personally prefer the classic method. But if it's something you need to show quickly, like an interior design preview that's still being revised often, then the AI denoiser is an excellent choice. Let's load our renders from the history one by one and decide which one looks best. Personally, I like this one. It has more tinted glass and a darker marble statue, which gives it a stronger look. Now let's take a look at some of the quickest yet highly effective post-production tools built right into the V-Ray frame buffer. Move your mouse to the right edge of the frame buffer window and drag it out to reveal a hidden panel. There's actually another panel hidden as well. Go to the top area and drag it down, just like you see on the screen. From the drop-down list shown above, select and add a color LUT. Its settings will then appear in this panel. I like Golden Autumn, so let's go with that. As you can see, a small drop-down folder labeled Golden Autumn has appeared in the list. You can click the eye icon next to it to toggle the effect on or off. Open the folder and let's take a look inside. The first setting is the white balance. From here, we can make the render appear cooler by shifting towards cooler colors, or alternatively, warm it up to give the image a warmer tone. In the second panel, we control the saturation and brightness. This allows us to adjust the intensity of the colors and the overall lightness to fit our needs precisely. The third section is used to apply a filmic tone mapping curve to your render, giving it a more photographic and natural look by compressing highlights and enhancing shadow details. Blending here controls how the tone map blends with the original image. Overwrite means it fully replaces the original tone. Tone mapping space defines the color space in which tone mapping is applied. Linear sRBG is the most commonly used for realistic results. Typeset to Hable, a cinematic curve that handles highlights and shadows gracefully. Shoulder strength controls how highlights are rolled off. Higher values compress bright areas more. Linear strength affects the midtone range. Increasing this gives more contrast and control over exposure in the midtones. Linear angle adjusts the slope of the midtone curve. This changes how quickly brightness increases in that range. Toe strength controls the shadows. Lower values retain more detail in dark areas. White point determines where pure white begins. A higher value gives more range before highlights are clipped. At the bottom, the curve preview shows how your adjustments affect the image, from shadows to highlights. This curve tool allows you to adjust red, green, and blue color channels individually, or all of them together, to fine-tune contrast, brightness, and color balance. This is a powerful way to color grade your render quickly and visually without leaving V-Ray. And lastly, color balance is the process of adjusting the intensities of the colors red, green, and blue. It helps to achieve natural-looking colors or a specific mood. By ticking the options above, you can select which tones to work on: all together, shadow, mid-tone, or highlight. That brings us to the end of our 12th lesson. Well done on completing your first project. This is an excellent and truly professional result. Now for practice, try experimenting with different view angles. Set up a few cameras around your scene, arrange the composition, and render as many shots as you like. Play around with lighting and shadows, tweak your material values, and see how it all comes together in the final render. Most importantly, enjoy the process and keep exploring. Good luck.